Congratulations! You've just woken up in 15th century England. The year is 1447, and you're in London, a bustling city of narrow, twisting streets and timber-framed houses. The air is thick with the mingled smells of hearth fires, animal waste, rotting garbage, and the Thames River, which serves both as a water source and an open sewer. But these concerns pale in comparison to your current predicament. You've been accused of treason against King Henry VI. The charge is false, the product of court intrigue and whispered lies from envious enemies. Yet in this time and place, truth carries far less weight than power, and now you find yourself being led through the looming, stone gatehouse of the Tower of London. This ancient fortress has stood for centuries. The good news? The tower is a royal palace, home to grand halls and elegant apartments adorned with vibrant tapestries and luxurious furnishings. The bad news? You're not heading to those quarters. Instead, you're escorted by yeoman warders, veteran guards, known for their unwavering loyalty, deeper into the fortress, down toward the dungeons beneath the White Tower. These yeoman warders are more than mere soldiers. In your time, they might be likened to elite federal agents or Secret Service operatives. Their duty is not only to keep you confined, but to ensure that whatever happens within these walls stays hidden from the outside world. As you descend the worn stone steps, the air grows colder and damp with moisture. Your torch flickers in the gloom, casting distorted shadows along the uneven walls. The passage narrows. You duck to avoid the low ceiling. The scent changes: mold, human waste, and something metallic and sweet that tightens your stomach. At the end of the corridor, a massive wooden door reinforced with iron bands blocks your way. One of the warders produces a large key. With a groan of metal, the door creaks open. The chamber inside is large but windowless, lit only by sputtering torches and wall sconces. The shifting light reveals a room built to inspire dread. This is the torture chamber of the Tower of London, in operation since the late 13th century under King Edward I. It's not just any chamber. This is where the most refined methods of coercion and suffering in England are practiced. Presiding over this dark space is the Duke of Exeter's daughter, the nickname given to the rack, a horrific device introduced in 1420 by the real Duke of Exeter. The rack dominates the center of the room, a heavy wooden frame with rollers at either end. Ropes connect these rollers to iron manacles meant for your wrists and ankles. By turning the levers, the victim is stretched, joints dislocate, muscles tear, and agony mounts. It's designed to inflict maximum pain without killing, at least not immediately. Along the walls hang other instruments of torment, thumb screws to crush fingers. The scavenger's daughter, a cruel invention that compresses the body rather than stretching it. Manacles for suspending prisoners by their wrists. Red-hot irons, pliers, knives, tools of a trade designed to reduce human beings to raw nerve. And pleading breath. These devices are not used indiscriminately. Their presence alone is a weapon, part of a psychological method known as tritio reles, the breaking of the spirit through terror before the body is ever touched. And now, two men stand waiting in this grim theater. One is Sir John Plett, the lieutenant of the Tower, responsible for managing prisoners of importance. The other is Master Edward Dalton, the king's official torturer. Unlike the sadistic caricature you may have imagined, Dalton is no frothing brute. He is a professional, a man with a grim duty, carried out with clinical precision and guided by centuries of procedure. Treason. Sir John begins, his voice surprisingly calm. You stand accused of plotting against His Majesty King Henry. The penalty is death, but a confession now may spare you the worst of what awaits. You declare your innocence, but he only sighs. They all say that at first, he murmurs. Master Dalton, show our guest what becomes of those who refuse the truth. Dalton steps forward, his expression unreadable. We begin with questions, he says, his voice level, almost cordial. If your answers satisfy, there may be no need to proceed. But if you remain silent or evasive, he gestures to the rack. This is the site of the examen rigorosum, the rigorous examination. First, we bind the wrists. Then we ask again. Should you resist further, we proceed to the lesser torments. He picks up a thumbscrew, a deceptively simple device made of two metal bars and a tightening screw. These, he says, compress the fingers until the bones crack. Many speak before we must use them. He sets it down, then lays his hand on the rack. If that fails, we move to this. With each turn of the rollers, the ropes tighten, joints stretch, dislocate, and if needed break. We can separate limb from limb if necessary. Most do not last that long. Sir John steps closer. The mind breaks before the body in most cases. Darkness, isolation, hunger. Men forget the passage of time. Sleep turns to torment. The world becomes these walls. He leans in, his voice low. Think carefully. A confession now will earn you the king's mercy. Resistance leads to consequences. He doesn't finish the sentence. He doesn't have to. Your fate is now tangled in the same net that once ensnared Cuthbert Simpson, a Protestant deacon who, over a century from now, will endure the rack 3 times and still refuse to name his fellows only to be burned alive. In Smithfield, or Guy Fawkes, in 1605, whose torture will be so extreme that his signature on his confession will barely resemble his handwriting. Sir John gives a final chance. Confess now. Name your allies. You say nothing. The guard sees you. Your clothing is stripped away, your wrists clamped in cold iron. The chamber's chill bites into your exposed skin. The walls echo with sounds from other centuries, screams that were never heard beyond these stone halls. And now, they wait for yours. Dalton approaches again, his manner unchanged. We begin with the thumbscrew. He explains its function as calmly as one might explain the rules of chess. Cold metal is unpleasant, he says. Hot metal is unbearable. He places the device into a brazier to heat. He moves to the strappado next. A rope and pulley. Your wrists are tied behind your back, then hoisted, forcing your shoulders to bear your weight. As your feet leave the ground, pain explodes through your upper body. Your own body does the work, Dalton says with quiet pride. That's the beauty of it. He drops you a few inches, then jerks you back upward. This sudden stop forces a violent snap from your shoulders. You scream. You can't help it. The names, Sir John repeats. Who conspired with you? Your silence earns further agony. And so it goes. You are returned to your cell, your body broken but not yet beyond repair. Straw for a bed, a bucket for waste, stale bread and thin gruel for food. Time blurs. There is no day or night, only the ache in your bones and the terror of what tomorrow brings. And tomorrow comes. You are summoned again. Dalton greets you as if resuming a casual conversation. Today, we progress further unless you've decided to speak. He gestures to heated irons now resting in the coals. Their purpose is clear. Sir John offers a final ploy. Your servants have spoken. We know about the visitors. The letters burned in your hearth. There is no escape. True or not, it doesn't matter. The seed is planted. Doubt begins its quiet work. The rack looms. They bind your wrists and ankles. Every stretch is agony. You are already wounded, dislocated. The device amplifies your brokenness. Dalton speaks softly. We've had men confess at the mere sight of this. Others took longer. You choose. Sir, John repeats. The names. Speak. But what can you say? The accusations are false. And yet the truth is irrelevant now. Pain is the new truth. And in this world, it always gets the final word. Stretches. Every instinct screams to confess, to say anything that might end this nightmare. But what names could you give? Random acquaintances? Friends? Family? Such a confession would condemn innocent others to this same chamber. Your silence is met with a nod from Sir John Dalton. He turns the lever one notch. The mechanism clicks. The ropes tighten. Your already damaged body stretches slightly, sending fresh waves of agony through your dislocated shoulders. Another turn. The ratchet clicks again. The sound echoes in the chamber, a small noise that signals immense suffering. Your body stretches further. Joints already dislocated are pulled wider apart. Muscles tear. Ligaments strain. The human body has natural limits. On the rack, these limits are deliberately exceeded. Each click of the ratchet takes you further into territory the body is not designed to endure. This is the moment where many broke. The combination of present agony and the certainty of worse to come overwhelmed even the strongest resolve. Faced with the rack, people confess to impossible crimes, consorting with devils flying through the air, changing into animals. Under such pain, fantasy and reality blur beyond recognition. Listen carefully, Sir John says, his voice penetrating. The haze of your suffering. Bishop Bonner arrives tomorrow. He has special methods for stubborn cases like yours. The name sends a chill through you despite your pain. Bishop Edmund Bonner, the devil's dancing bear, is notorious even in this era of routine cruelty under Queen Mary the Firm. He will torture hundreds of Protestants with sadistic creativity. Unlike the professional Dalton, Bonner takes personal pleasure in breaking his victims. One night to decide, Sir John continues. Confession tomorrow, or Bishop Bonner's attentions. Consider carefully. The session ends. You're released from the rack. Your body is now a landscape of injury. The guards return you to your cell, where you collapse onto the straw pallet. Every movement is an exercise in agony. Night falls again in your cell. Pain makes sleep impossible. Your dislocated shoulders throb, and the stretched muscles of your entire body scream with every slight movement. The mention of Bishop Bonner replays in your mind along with stories you've heard of his cruelty. Medieval torture was not merely physical. The isolation, the uncertainty, the deliberate manipulation of hope and fear all were weapons used against the prisoner's mind. Many broke psychologically before their bodies gave out. In the darkness of your cell, a strange thing happens. A figure appears, a monk in a simple brown robe. He offers water, then gently helps you sit up despite your injuries. I am Brother Thomas, he says softly. I serve as physician to the tower's prisoners. This too is part of the system. Medical care for torture victims wasn't humanitarian. It was practical. Dead prisoners told no secrets. A prisoner who died under questioning was a failure of the process. Brother Thomas examines your injuries with practiced hands. He manipulates your dislocated shoulders, popping them back into their sockets with sudden movements that draw gasps of pain from you. Then he applies salves to your wounds and binds your damaged joints. These will heal, he says, if given time. But time is the one thing you don't have. Tomorrow brings either confession or Bishop Bonner. Neither promises healing. As he works, Brother Thomas speaks quietly about his role in this grim place. He has treated hundreds of prisoners over the years, easing their suffering enough to ensure they survive for more questioning. His position is morally complex, a healer who enables further torture by keeping victims alive. I've seen stronger. Then you break, he tells you, without judgment. Is he offering compassionate advice or serving as another tool of coercion? In the torture chamber, even kindness becomes suspect. Every interaction is potentially manipulation, designed to wear down resistance. Before leaving, Brother Thomas offers one last piece of information. Whether as warning or mercy is unclear, Bishop Bonner brings his own devices, he says. Things even Master Dalton considers excessive. His favorite is the burning chair, an iron seat, heated from below while the victim is questioned. With these chilling words, he departs, leaving you alone with your pain and the terrible choice that awaits in the morning. Dawn comes too quickly. The cell door opens, and the guards appear. But instead of taking you directly to the chamber, they bring you to a small room where water for washing and fresh clothing wait. Sir John wishes you presented properly to the bishop, one explains. This unexpected courtesy is more frightening than immediate return to the chamber. It suggests something ceremonial about the coming encounter, something worthy of preparation. Cleaned and dressed, you're led not to the underground chamber but to a larger room on the ground floor of the White Tower. Windows here admit actual daylight, your first glimpse of the sun since entering the tower. The room contains a large table surrounded by chairs. It looks almost like a council chamber rather than a torture room. But the illusion of civility is shattered by what stands in the corner, an iron chair with straps for arms and legs, positioned over a compartment clearly designed to hold hot coals. 3 men await. Sir John, you recognize. Beside him stands a heavy-set man in bishop's robes, Edmund Bonner himself, his fleshy face set in an expression of amused contempt. The third man is a royal clerk, quill and parchment ready to record whatever transpires. Our guest arrives, Bonner says, his voice surprisingly soft for a man of his reputation. I've heard much about your stubborn character. Unlike Dalton's professional detachment, Bonner's manner suggests personal interest in your suffering. His eyes evaluate you like a craftsman assessing raw material, calculating what methods might work best to break you. Before we begin with my special methods, he says, gesturing to the iron chair, I'll offer what Sir John and Master Dalton have already proposed. Confess your treason, name your accomplices, and your punishment will be merciful, a quick execution. Rather than what I have planned, the torture chambers of medieval Europe operated on a sophisticated understanding of human psychology. They recognized that the anticipation of pain can be as effective as pain itself. By displaying instruments, explaining procedures, and offering alternatives, They created a mental framework where confession seemed not just inevitable but desirable. This was the true power of the torture chamber, not just the physical agony it inflicted, but the way it reconstructed reality for its victims. Within its walls, innocence became an unaffordable luxury. Truth became whatever stopped the pain. Principles and loyalty dissolved against the immediate necessity of relief. As you stand before Bishop Bonner, facing the terrible choice between false confession and unendurable suffering, you understand why the medieval torture chamber was so feared. Its true horror lay not in its devices but in its inexorable logic, a system that left no room for human dignity or objective truth. And as the bishop gestures toward the waiting chair, its metal already beginning to glow from the coals beneath, you realize that few indeed would last even a single day in such a place. Not because of physical weakness, but because to endure meant sacrificing either truth or self in ways that tore at the very foundations of human identity. The iron chair awaits, its surface radiating heat you can feel from several paces away. The decision that faces you, confession or resistance, is one that countless prisoners confronted throughout the medieval period. Some chose truth and suffered accordingly. Others chose relief and carried the moral burden of false confession and the betrayal of innocence. There are no simple heroes or villains in this darkest corner of medieval justice. Only human beings caught in a system that stripped away everything except the capacity for pain and the desperate desire to escape it. Cop bad cop routine, centuries before the term existed, proved remarkably effective. The contrast between initial kindness and subsequent cruelty disoriented victims, making resistance more difficult. Many broke under this psychological whiplash. Even before serious physical torture began, Bonner's career illustrates how torture in medieval Europe wasn't simply about inflicting pain. It was a sophisticated system combining psychological manipulation, social isolation, sensory deprivation, and physical suffering, all aimed at breaking the individual's will. The medieval torture chamber thus represents not just cruelty, but a developed understanding of human psychology. Its practitioners knew that fear often exceeds pain in effectiveness. They recognized that anticipation multiplies suffering. They understood how to leverage social isolation and sensory manipulation to weaken resistance. This sophisticated psychological dimension separates medieval European torture from simpler punitive violence in other historical contexts. The chamber wasn't just a place where pain was inflicted, it was a carefully designed environment where every element, from architecture to procedure, served the goal of breaking human resistance. As you rebuild your life after the tower, you discover that society offers little sympathy for torture survivors. Those who haven't experienced it cannot comprehend it. Those who approve of the system see no reason to question its effects. Those who might sympathize fear association with someone once accused of treason, even if later exonerated. This social isolation, the inability to share or process traumatic experience, compounded the psychological damage of torture itself. Without community support or formal therapeutic approaches, survivors largely suffered in silence, their invisible wounds as lasting as their physical scars. Months after your release, you encounter a former tower guard in a London tavern. He doesn't recognize you. To him, prisoners were interchangeable bodies, not individual humans. You watch him drink and laugh, apparently unburdened by his participation in systematic cruelty. This too is part of how torture persisted in medieval society. Those who administered it compartmentalized their actions, separating professional duty from moral responsibility. Few torturers considered themselves evil. Most viewed their work as a necessary service to crown and country. The experience of narrowly escaping Bishop Bonner's attentions follows you through life. Dreams of the iron chair heated to glowing recur for years. The smell of hot metal triggers immediate panic. Certain rooms, particularly stone chambers with low ceilings, become impossible to enter. These reactions, which we now recognize as symptoms of trauma, had no name in medieval England. They were simply the expected aftermath of the tower's attentions, the invisible price paid by those who survived its chambers. Your story, from false accusation through torture to unexpected reprieve, captures elements common to many who experienced medieval justice: the arbitrariness, the physical suffering, the psychological manipulation, and the permanent aftermath. These compose a pattern repeated throughout the period. What separates medieval torture from modern understandings isn't primarily the methods used. Many techniques survive to this day, but the social acceptance that surrounded them. Torture wasn't hidden or denied. It was an acknowledged, regulated part of the justice system, complete with rules, procedures, and official positions. This institutional nature made medieval torture particularly insidious. Operating openly under royal authority, administered by professionals following established protocols, it carried a legitimacy that isolated instances of cruelty could never achieve. As you trace the raised scars on your thumbs, permanent souvenirs of Dalton's attentions, you understand something few of your contemporaries grasp. The distance between civilization and barbarism is far narrower than most imagine. Normal, decent people can participate in terrible systems. Sophisticated societies can incorporate methodical cruelty. The capacity for sanctioned suffering lies just beneath the surface of ordered community. Years pass after your experience in the Tower of London. Life returns to a semblance of normality, though the memories never truly fade. Then, in 1455, England descends into civil war. The conflict, later called the Wars of the Roses. As political fortunes shift violently, you decide that England has become too dangerous. Like many merchants and scholars fleeing the conflict, you make your way to the European continent. Your travels take you first to the German lands, not yet a unified country, but a patchwork of independent cities, principalities, and ecclesiastical territories within the Holy Roman Empire. Here, far from the Tower of London, you discover that the art of torture has taken different forms, reflecting local legal traditions and cultural practices. In Nuremberg, one of the great imperial cities, you encounter a justice system both similar to and different from England's. Like England, Nuremberg employs torture as an investigative tool. Unlike England, where torture remains primarily a tool of state security used against political prisoners, German cities apply it more broadly to ordinary criminal cases. The German approach to torture is systematized under what scholars call the Carolina Code, the criminal law of Emperor Charles V, formally issued in 1532 but already influential in legal practice. This code establishes specific guidelines for when and how torture may be applied, creating a framework that both enables and constrains judicial cruelty. Under the Carolina Code, torture requires substantial preliminary evidence, not just accusation. Multiple eyewitnesses, physical evidence, or a documented history of similar crimes must exist before torture can be authorized. These requirements, though often honored in the breach, represent an attempt to limit arbitrary application. In Nuremberg's town hall, you're granted permission to observe a criminal proceeding, not the torture itself, which remains private, but the judicial process surrounding it. A local official explains the graduated system of torture used in German lands. We begin with territio verbalis, verbal intimidation, he explains. The accused is described in vivid detail what awaits them if they don't confess. Many confess at this stage, requiring no physical methods. This psychological dimension, using fear as a precursor to actual pain, appears throughout European torture systems. The mind's ability to anticipate suffering often proves more effective than suffering itself if verbal intimidation fails. The official continues, we proceed to territio reales, showing the instruments of torture and demonstrating their use. The accused is brought to the chamber and watches as the devices are prepared. This staged demonstration, a theatrical performance of impending pain, constitutes a crucial phase in German judicial torture. Court records show that significant numbers of accused confess during this demonstration phase, before experiencing actual physical torture. Only if these preliminary measures fail do they proceed to the question ordinaire, actual physical torture. Even then, they follow strict protocols regarding duration, intensity, and medical supervision. These protocols reveal the paradoxical nature of medieval torture, a system that inflicts extreme suffering while simultaneously attempting to regulate that suffering through bureaucratic rules. The tension between cruelty and constraint defines judicial torture throughout its history. In Nuremberg, you visit the underground chambers beneath the town hall where torture is conducted. Unlike the tower's stone simplicity, the Nuremberg torture chamber is almost clinically equipped. Various specialized devices line the walls, each designed for particular effects. The German territories have developed their own characteristic instruments. The pair of anguish, a pear-shaped metal device inserted into bodily orifices and then expanded by turning a screw. The knee splitter, pointed spikes to crush the knee joint between wooden plates. The breast ripper, used primarily on women accused of adultery or abortion, tears flesh with heated metal claws. What strikes you about the German approach is its methodical nature. Torture here isn't just systematic in application, But in design, each device is engineered for specific effects, calibrated to produce maximum pain without necessarily causing death. This reflects a broader German cultural emphasis on technical precision and craftsmanship applied disturbingly to the production of suffering. From Germany, your travels take you to France, where torture has developed yet another regional character. Here, under the système judiciaire of royal courts, torture functions as part of an inquisitorial legal process distinct from both English and German approaches. In Paris, you learn about the brodequins, wooden boards placed around the legs and tightened with cords until bones shatter. You hear of the estrapade, the French version of the strappado, with national refinements including weights on the feet and periodic dousings with cold water to prolong consciousness. The French have systematized torture differently than their German neighbors. Where German practice emphasizes graduated intensity, French procedures focus on duration and repetition. A French legal scholar explains the rationale. Constant moderate pain, with little hope of relief, breaks resistance more effectively than brief extreme agony. The mind surrenders when it recognizes that suffering will continue indefinitely. This insight that hopelessness often proves more devastating than pain guides the French torture system. By carefully managing physical suffering to permit extended application, French authorities create a psychological environment where resistance seems futile. The true horror of medieval torture is not simply the pain it inflicted, but the fact that it worked, that it succeeded, time and again, in breaking human beings not through random brutality but through deliberate, structured application of fear, isolation, and agony. This system, crafted by men who saw themselves as agents of law, morality, and even salvation, proved terrifyingly effective, not because it was chaotic, but because it was coherent. You understand now that no moral fortitude, no intellectual clarity, no righteous cause could reliably withstand what the chamber imposed. People did not fail under torture. They responded exactly as the system intended. And therein lies the most chilling realization. Torture was not a failure of medieval justice. It was one of its most carefully engineered successes. In the quiet moments of your old age, long after the bruises faded and the muscles healed, you sometimes trace the outlines of your experience, not just the marks left on your skin, but the deeper imprint on your soul. You recognize how it shaped your understanding of institutions, of power, of human behavior. You've come to see the world as layered, surface civility above, sanctioned violence just beneath. Even as England modernizes and the instruments of torture fall out of public use, the mindset obedience through fear, compliance through spectacle remains in other forms. Sometimes you wonder how many others live with these buried memories, how many walk the same streets quietly carrying their scars, both visible and not. Torture leaves more survivors than anyone likes to admit, but their stories rarely surface. They are inconvenient to narratives of progress or righteousness. In your final reflections, what once seemed isolated and exceptional, the dark stone rooms, the burn of metal, the cold detachment of your interrogators, now appears as part of a pattern not confined to one age. What distinguishes the medieval chamber is not its brutality alone, but the sophistication with which that brutality was justified, integrated, and even celebrated within supposedly moral systems. This understanding, hard-earned and unwelcome, becomes your final testimony that beneath robes of law, vestments of religion, and uniforms of state, the potential for cruelty always lingers. It takes only the right justification, the right fear, the right crisis, and the chamber will reopen, not in stone walls beneath castles perhaps, but in rooms with cleaner lines and colder lights. And so, in the end, the chamber teaches not just about the past, but about the present and the future. Its legacy is a warning, one that only survivors are equipped to deliver, toward forms of justice that maintain security without requiring systematic suffering to do so. Your account, sealed within the pages of your family Bible, remains hidden for generations, waiting not to shock, but to educate. Its purpose is not to condemn medieval society as uniquely cruel, but to illustrate how cruelty can become methodical, even rational, when justified by authority, fear, and the pursuit of order. You've seen firsthand how ordinary people, neither sadistic nor monstrous, can become functionaries in a system that redefines pain as procedure, confession as truth, and suffering as necessity. In your final days, this is what troubles you most, not simply what happened to you, but how easily it happened. How readily structures of law, theology, and power converge to normalize what should never have been normalized. How the architecture of the tower, the etiquette of the interrogators, the ink of the confession each played its part in a machine designed not to obtain truth, but to uphold control. This is the hardest truth to convey to those who will never see the chamber, that torture was not a failure of civilization, but one of its cold successes, and so your testimony is not only about pain, but about systems, about the mechanics of obedience, the bureaucracies of violence, and the moral numbness that grows wherever cruelty becomes institutionalized. It is about how fear shapes behavior far beyond the moment of its application, how even those untouched by the chamber nonetheless live beneath its shadow, adjusting their speech, their beliefs, their loyalties in subtle acts of self-preservation. It is about the quiet complicity of the populace, who, informed by rumor and spectacle, learn to look away or worse, to rationalize what they suspect but cannot confront, and about the officials who believe themselves just even righteous as they operate the machinery of torment. The most chilling realization is not that they are evil, but that they are ordinary. But within this grim clarity lies a fragile hope. Because if cruelty is not inevitable, if it is instead constructed, authorized, implemented, and maintained, then it can also be deconstructed, resisted, reformed. You hope that those who read your account in centuries to come will do more than recoil in horror. You hope they will recognize the signs of institutional cruelty in their own time, however sanitized, rebranded, or hidden it may be. That they will see how truth can be twisted into justification, how security can become a euphemism for suppression, how power always seeks methods overt or covert to compel obedience, and perhaps armed with this understanding, they will demand something better. Not a perfect justice. Human societies may never achieve that, but one that no longer requires the chamber to function. One that resists the temptation to prove truth through pain, to protect order through fear, to preserve authority through suffering. This, above all, is the final lesson your experience offers, that cruelty is never just an event, it is a process. One that begins with fear, is legitimized through institutions, and is sustained by silence. Break that silence, and the process falters. And so, with your last written words, you entrust not just a memory, but a challenge to those who follow. Remember the chamber, not only for what it did, but for what it meant. Learn to recognize it, even when it changes its name. And when you see its shadow falling again upon your world, do not look away. In this way, the legacy of your suffering may serve a purpose beyond survival, a light cast backward through history and forward into the future, illuminating the dark places where power and pain still intertwine. And with that final thought, you close your eyes, not in peace perhaps, but in understanding,